Hey guys, welcome to Howling Wolf Customs. Howling Wolf Customs is something that I came up with years ago, and it kind of started because I grew up. I'm 35, so I was born in 90. But I grew up, reading Iron Horse magazine and all the other, motorcycle magazines when Jesse James and Paul Tuttle Sr. and Jr., all of them were doing their shows. Reading all the articles and seeing the stuff about Indian Larry and, several other big creators, plus some local builders that I knew. And then, even now seeing Danny Coker, a.k.a. The Count, doing Count's Custom, some of the bikes and cars he builds, to me it's just cool. But I kind of wanted to do this little podcast show, whatever you so choose to call it. As of right now, the working title is Wind Therapy. It's probably what I'm going to go with right now, just because I like the idea on it. But kind of give you a little bit of backstory, starting with me, and then I'll set up some interviews with some other people, and we'll kind of go from there. So, for starters, most people I know just call me Red. Some people call me Scarecrow, Gypsies, whatever you so choose to call me. I pretty much my whole life have been, fascinated and obsessed with motorcycles and, been around, growing up in the 90s and whatnot. Had my grandmother, she used to take me to this bar that her friend owned, and Lord knows I had no business being in that bar at that age, but come to find out I didn't know this, but apparently it was a biker owned a bar. And I didn't know that until I started talking to some people, and really they're like, yeah, dude, yeah, that club was owned by so-and-so, and this and that. And I was like, okay, well, I just remember being there and them being very welcome because they knew my grandmother, and they're like, hey, he's with me. And like I said, I'm a little kid. Well, I was never a little kid, but, because hell, by this point, I was probably already, I would have been starting going to this place. I was about 8 or 9. Even then, dude, I was 5'6" to 5'9". So I was not a small kid. People probably would have thought I was a lot older, but hell, I'm 6'6" now, so. But, growing up, my grandmother used to take me to this bar, and I remember the lady that owned the bar, she had like one of those little slot machines on the counter, and I'd sit there and just put my money in and try to see if I could win money back, and, she'd always joke, well, whatever you win, half of it's mine. And I was like, I'm a little kid, I'm just, I don't get the joke, but apparently she was somewhat serious. But then, I got to hang out with some people like that and whatnot, and only then, when I got older, I started hanging out with some of the local bikers and some other stuff, and come to find out that my grandmother, she used to ride with several clubs back in the 70s, I think. If I remember correctly, she rode with Banditos, and she rode with a club called the Devil's Angels, which apparently was like a support or subsidiary that got turned into the Outlaws. David Allan Coe was a family friend of ours. You know, I didn't know. I met him once or twice, and he was always just introduced to me as, David or, whatever. And, sorry, I guess I got thirsty. But, then I found out years later after I met my dad when I was 17, almost 18. My dad rode. He rode with a 1% club for a little while. Not going to say their name just because that's Dad's story to tell kind of thing. But yeah, so that makes me a minimum of a third generation. But I started riding, started riding motorcycles. I used to ride around on motorcycles when I was a kid, like riding on the back of people's bikes or inside cars and stuff like that, and on a trike. And then first time I started riding dirt bikes and motorcycles, I was probably 12 or 13, and pretty much been on and off of them since I was a kid. And like I said, 35 now, so 22, 23 years I've been climbing on 2 and 3 wheels. I've considered, building my own bike at some point and customizing, hence the reason Howling Wolf Customs, kind of idea. But, I ride mostly with myself. Got a couple of people that I've gotten to be really good friends with over the years. I've lost a few friends. I've got a very good friend of mine to me that was kind of a father figure to me, named Nathan. And everybody just called him Pop. But I remember I was working at an auto parts store. And he showed up at my job on this new bike, this little bobber. I remember this thing. And normally he had a Goldwing, and he had been talking about selling me that Goldwing for so long. And he said he needed this little part, and I could get it on Amazon or eBay or something for like $40 and put it in, kind of thing. But I remember he showed up at my job on this little bobber. And he was fairly shorter than me, but, I was able to sit on this bike somewhat easily. Because the way it's set, it had bars, like, it kind of, not quite ape hangers, but they were up here. And, I remember I guess he must have been riding it pretty hard, because I remember this. And I saw somebody talking about this the other day. Somebody had taken header wrap and put it on the pipes on this thing. And I remember, because I'm a lot longer legged than him, so when I sat down, the exhaust pipe hit the inside of the back of my leg, just below my kneecap, and I remember it burned me through my pants. I have a permanent scar because of that, but it's just. But he was like, "Yeah, man, just take it, take it for a spin," and it's crazy. I started the bike up. I let the clutch out, and I let the clutch out too fast, and the bike kind of took off, and it drug the kickstand a little bit, and it tore up the asphalt a little bit because hadn't had a chance to kick it up yet. And I remember seeing him riding around that bike, and I told him, like, you need to be careful on this bike, man, because this bike's going to be the death of you. And unfortunately, I was quite right, because I was going home either that night or the very next day. And I was going up the road, and I saw a tow truck. And saw the bike on the tow truck, and I said, that looks like Nathan's bike. And I didn't think nothing about it. I mean, I thought about it, but I wasn't thinking about it. And I was like, I just went home. And I went to reach out to Nathan, being like, hey, man, I just saw a record with a bike look just like yours on it. And before I could even send the message, I saw an article pop up about motorcycle wreck on this road that was right by where I lived. Apparently, it had happened not long before I got off work. And from what I understand, he had gotten into it with somebody at a local store, and apparently it had gotten really heated. And Nathan was coming this way down the road, and apparently the guy that he got into it with was driving a G-Body Cutlass or Monte Carlo, one of the two, and they whipped in right in front of him, and Nathan hit the driver door, and it threw him off the bike and threw him up over, and he pretty much was killed almost immediately, because the impact crumbled the bike, crumbled him, and I don't know if they ever pressed charges against him, but yeah, that was one biker funeral I didn't want to attend, but first bike ever owned, I was living in Kentucky, and somebody got me an '09 Harley Fat Boy. And it was painted like a military bike, because I've always had a fascination with the old military bikes. Especially if you've ever seen Rocky Horror Picture Show, the original with Meatloaf and stuff. His bike was just, spot on. There's an old WLA, I think 740 or something like that. I don't remember. I'll have to double check that or whatever. But I know there's an old WLA. I do remember that much. But yeah, they had painted it like old military bike. Had the old military green paint, star on the tank, USA, and had the bar tag and whatnot on it. It was kind of cool. And I remember somebody took my keys while I was sleeping, and I got up the next morning and walked outside, and I was like, yeah, where is my bike? And it wasn't long after, I got a phone call. Hey man, I just found your bike up the road, and it's wrecked, it's totaled. I was like, well, it wasn't me, because I was trying to figure out where my bike is. And, yeah, so-and-so took your bike, and yeah, he, apparently he laid it in a ditch at about 120 from what they were trying to tell me. But it bent the front forks up, almost straight up in the air. I'm not entirely sure how he bent them that high. But yeah, it completely, like, bent the front fork straight up, and they didn't even, insurance wouldn't buy me a new bike, whatever else, because I don't know. But then a couple years later, I bought an '83 Virago 750 off a guy for $200, which apparently a couple days later he managed to blow himself up in a meth lab that was apparently in his apartment. And I remember because I went into his bedroom to get the helmet that he had with the bike, and it wasn't there, so he used the money he got from me that he said they needed to pay some bills to build this thing, and blew the whole wall out of the apartment, killed him, blew his girlfriend's arms off, and they said if she had lived, she was going to prison for the rest of her life. Don't know if she did or didn't. Thankfully, their child was at grandma's house, but when he sold me the bike, he thought it was an 82, and he thought it was a 650. My mechanic was like, no, dude, it's an 83, and it's a 750, a shaft drive, all that crap. Just a good little bike, but I got did dirty on that one. And then I just recently had a 2000 or 2002 or something like that. There's a little Honda 1200 bobber. Had the spring, I call it a Springer seat, but it's like you see like in the old tractors and stuff. It's just the wide pan seat for one person. It's got the two big coil springs that sit on the posts. I looked funny as hell on that bike, but I was so happy because it was given to me for free, and the guy had got it at an auction for a couple $100, and I ended up having to give the bike back because he couldn't produce paperwork showing me that it wasn't stolen, or they tried to claim that there's no way they would sell a bike at the auction without a bill of sale and all that stuff. So I gave it back to avoid possible stuff. But I'm entered for a chance to win a 2000 Road King right now. It's a mechanic special. I know they said they think it needs an ECM and a head pipe. That's a fairly simple fix other than getting the ECM program to the bike. But they're doing that giveaway drawing on the 28th. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed on that one. But if not, I'm in the middle of resetting some savings and stuff so that I can put towards getting a bike. Right now I'm leaning on getting what I want is a Road King or an Electric Glide, because they seem to be very fitting to me. But it's a little bit about me. But I want to continue this series. I'm going to do some interviews with some other people, kind of see where we're going, how I feel like going with the channel and whatnot. Or not the channel, but with the series. I'm going to do some interviews and whatnot. So if you're interested and submitting some, coming for an interview and whatnot, we can get down and talk about it and whatnot. And as one of my favorite movies would say, guys, burn rubber, not your souls. And remember, guys, never fly faster than you, never ride faster than your guardian angel can fly. Alright, guys. Peace out.